So a little bit of bad news recently on the old, oh god, Antarctica is collapsing front. Turns out a 350 metre thick ice shelf that acts like a cork in a bottle, holding back a 2 kilometre thick country-sized glacier, is, according to researchers on the spot, about to give way any day now. Antarctica's a very long way away from anywhere though, isn't it? So does it really matter? Yeah. Hello, and welcome to Just Have a Think. You may have seen this news for yourself in the last couple of weeks, although I have to say I'm a bit surprised at the lack of coverage in mainstream media. Or am I surprised? Maybe not. Anyway, just in case you're wondering what I am on about and hoping that I might get to the point sooner rather than later, I am of course referring to the latest update from the mighty Thwaites Glacier, and more specifically, the ice shelf that's currently pinning it in place. I've made a few videos about Thwaites Glacier, as long-term viewers may remember. You might know it better as the Doomsday Glacier, a nickname presumably coined because the real name wasn't quite exciting enough. Anyway, trying to effectively communicate the magnitude of this thing is no easy task without physically taking you there and showing it to you in person. Not that you'd be able to see it all anyway, even if you stood right in front of it, because it's roughly the same size as Great Britain or Florida. To understand what's going on here, we have to make a very important distinction between East Antarctica and West Antarctica, and between the Thwaites Glacier ice sheet and the ice shelf that sits in front of it. Before we get into all that though, could I ask you to take a couple of seconds to click the free like and subscribe buttons just down here, if you haven't already done so. As you may have heard from other content creators recently, the YouTube algorithm favours videos that it thinks will bring the largest number of people to the platform, and that generally means channels like this one get overlooked in favour of more salacious clickbait stuff. The only way I can counter that is to make sure my videos are as good as I can make them, and then rely on you guys to show YouTube that you support what I'm doing. So if you want to keep up with my latest posts, then hitting the subscribe button and the notification bell is the best way to do that. And of course, you'd really be helping me out as well. Now then, as luck would have it, a brand new topographical map of Antarctica's bedrock was published in 2025, giving our sciencey friends an even clearer picture of what's going on beneath the vast continent-sized ice pack, some of which has been there for millions of years, and is now thought to be almost 5 kilometres thick in places. The project, called Bedmap 3, adds enormous amounts of new data. The updated map incorporates 84 additional airborne geophysical surveys, around 52 million new measurement points, and roughly 1.9 million kilometres of radar survey lines. Those data points have greatly improved coverage of remote parts of the continent that were previously poorly understood. Perhaps most importantly, the map helps scientists observe which regions are most at risk from climate change. You can clearly see that while large parts of East Antarctica sit on bedrock above sea level, many sectors of West Antarctica, and actually some important sectors of East Antarctica too, occupy deep basins that extend far below sea level. As we've discovered in previous videos, that configuration allows warm ocean water to penetrate farther under the ice, potentially accelerating its retreat. And that's a major reason why scientists are extremely anxious about the Thwaites Glacier ice shelf. Because while the main ice sheet is perched on land, albeit precariously, the ice shelf that holds it back is essentially floating on the ocean, pinned only at one point where the seabed rises up to form a sort of wedge that creates a grounding point. In simple terms, the ice shelf acts like a giant buttress or retaining wall. Losing a floating shelf like this doesn't directly raise sea levels, of course, because it's already sitting in the water. But if it does let go, which researchers believe could literally be any time in the next year or so, then the country-sized glacier behind it can start to flow into the ocean much faster. Satellite observations show the eastern Thwaites ice shelf is now heavily fractured and pulling away from the main glacier. Researchers describe its internal structure as increasingly fragile, with cracks spreading through the ice, suggesting the shelf's disintegration could indeed happen very soon. That doesn't mean the entire glacier behind it would slide straight into the water like plates off a tray. It's a big old lump, so there's some significant inertia to overcome here. Scientists reckon the collapse will unfold over decades or perhaps even centuries. The thing is though, it's not just the size of Thwaites that has scientists worried, it's its position within the wider West Antarctic ice sheet. Apparently Thwaites acts as a kind of gateway or Keystone Glacier. If it retreats far enough, it could destabilise neighbouring glaciers and allow much larger volumes of inland ice to begin flowing towards the sea. A very recently published study assessed the major causes of sea level rise over the past 60 years and why the rate has been accelerating. The researchers found that the global sea level has risen by an average of about 2 millimetres per year since 1960, but that rate has almost doubled in recent decades, reaching roughly 4 millimetres per year between 2005 and 2023. Turns out that ocean warming is still the single largest contributor, accounting for around 43% of total sea level rise over the last 60 odd years or so. And that's because as ocean waters warm, they expand in a process appropriately known as thermal expansion, which means sea levels can rise even if no additional water enters the ocean. Our oceans absorb roughly 90% of the excess heat trapped by greenhouse gases, and given that our oceans cover more than 70% of the planet, that expansion effect is enormous. And as the waters get warmer, places like West Antarctica become more vulnerable because the warmer water keeps attacking the underside of ice shelves and glaciers and destabilising their anchor points. One of the more significant conclusions of the paper, though, is that the balance of causes of sea level rise has shifted over time. Earlier in the record, ocean warming dominated, but since the 1990s, accelerating ice loss from Greenland, Antarctica and mountain glaciers has become a much larger driver of the increase in sea level rise. The system is effectively moving from one increasingly driven by thermal expansion to one increasingly driven by actual mass loss from land ice. There's enough ice locked up in Thwaites Glacier itself to raise global sea levels by around 65 centimetres, but because Thwaites acts like a keystone, holding back neighbouring glaciers, its eventual collapse could contribute to a wider destabilisation of the West Antarctic ice sheet that contains enough ice to raise sea levels by around 3 metres. Again, not tomorrow or next year, but not thousands of years in the future either. Coastal impact researchers suggest 3 metres of sea level rise is enough to displace between 500 million and 1 billion people from coastal cities, depending on how quickly we get our act together with sea defences. That includes low-lying countries like Bangladesh, but also globally economically important cities like New York, Miami, London, Shanghai, and Tokyo. This recent paper, published in the American Geophysical Union's Geophysical Research Letters, used 2 independent ice sheet models and calibrated them using real observations of how Thwaites Glacier has actually been changing between 2004 and 2017, so that the researchers could project how the glacier might evolve out to 2067. What they found is that Thwaites could reach annual ice losses of roughly 180 to 200 billion tonnes per year by the 2060s, which is roughly the amount of ice mass lost from the entire Antarctic ice sheet today. And rather worryingly, the paper's authors also found that the models that best match recent real-world observations are also the models producing the highest future losses. Another recently published paper from the European Geosciences Union was co-authored by Dr. Ella Gilbert from the British Antarctic Survey, who you might know better as Dr. Gilbs from her YouTube channel. This paper tackles one of the biggest challenges scientists face when trying to understand Antarctica's future, which is the fact that the continent is huge, remote, and incredibly difficult to measure. Weather stations are sparse, satellite data has limitations, and many existing global climate models simply don't have the resolution to capture Antarctica's extremely complex coastal weather systems. To address that problem, the researchers created the Polar RES dataset, combining 4 state-of-the-art regional climate models at roughly 11 km resolution, specifically designed to capture Antarctic conditions in much greater detail. Why does that matter for places like Thwaites Glacier? Well, because the future of Antarctica's ice doesn't just depend on rising global temperatures, it's also driven by very specific local processes like coastal winds, snowfall patterns, ocean interactions, surface melting events, and the movement of heat and moisture around the continent. The authors found that their new modelling system generally performs better than previous lower resolution datasets at reproducing these Antarctic climate features, giving scientists a more powerful tool for investigating how the ice sheet may respond as the planet continues to warm. The study doesn't predict the collapse of any particular glacier, but it improves the climate information that feeds into the ice sheet models used to estimate future sea level rise. So now we've got the new Bedmap 3 topographical projection, which gives us the clearest picture yet of Antarctica's hidden landscape, the Thwaites Ice Shelf studies that show that some of the glaciers occupying these deep marine basins are already destabilising, The sea level budget study that confirms that ice sheet mass loss is becoming an increasingly important driver of observed sea level rise, and the polar RES study that highlights specific regional variables that can affect glacier deterioration. Usually, as measurements improve, uncertainty shrinks, but in Antarctica's case, better measurements keep revealing deeper basins and more complex glacier geometry and more potential pathways for instability than we previously realised. Confidence in sea level projections is definitely increasing though. Scientists now have a much clearer understanding of where the water is coming from and why the rate is accelerating. The findings reinforce the conclusion that sea level rise is not a temporary fluctuation, but a long-term consequence of planetary warming that's likely to continue for centuries, even if emissions are eventually reduced, because oceans and ice sheets respond very slowly to changes in temperature. So should we all be panicking then? Well, no, not really. None of these studies are saying that Antarctica is about to suddenly collapse into the sea next week. What they are saying, though, is something perhaps more important. With every new survey flight, every new satellite pass, and every new generation of ice sheet models, scientists are gradually replacing estimation with observation. The picture that's emerging isn't one of imminent catastrophe, but it's not particularly one of great reassurance either. It's a picture of an ice sheet that appears increasingly sensitive to a warming world, and one whose future behaviour matters enormously to every coastal community on Earth. Antarctica may feel unimaginably distant from most of us, but the oceans connecting it to our shorelines are not. And that, my friends, is why what happens at the bottom of the world matters to all of us. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, but that's it for this week. A massive thank you, as always, to the amazing people who support the channel on a monthly basis via Patreon and who help me keep ads and sponsorship messages out of all my videos. And I must just give a quick shout out to some folks who've joined recently with pledges of $10 or more a month. They are Joanne Bradshaw, Jennifer Carr, Bruce Robinson, Alistair and Gopal Batu. And of course a big thank you to everyone else who's joined since last time too. If you'd like the chance to leave feedback on preview versions of each video, take part in monthly content polls to choose future videos, and chat directly with me and other like-minded souls, then you can do just that by visiting patreon.com/justhaveathink. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you found this video useful, and most importantly of all, thanks very much for watching until the end. Much appreciated. Have a great week, and remember to just have a think. See you next week.